The boardroom was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the antique clock mounted on the wall, a clock that had been in their family for generations. Emma sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings absent-mindedly as she watched her brother Daniel take his seat at the head. He looked different today, more confident, almost arrogant, with an air of authority that hadn't been there before. The promotion to managing director had changed him overnight. Daniel cleared his throat, and all eyes turned toward him. His voice was steady but tinged with something Emma couldn't quite place. Triumph? Smugness? Whatever it was, it sent a shiver down her spine. "Thank you all for being here," he began, glancing around the room at the other executives who nodded respectfully. Then his gaze landed on Emma, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes locked. She saw it then, a flicker of cold calculation behind his polished smile. "I've called this meeting to discuss some important changes I believe are necessary for the future of our company." His tone was professional, measured, but there was no mistaking the weight of his words. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Something wasn't right. She leaned forward slightly, her instincts screaming at her to pay attention. "As many of you know, we're entering a critical phase of growth. To ensure we stay competitive, I've decided to streamline operations and make key adjustments to leadership roles within the organization." He paused, letting the gravity of his statement sink in. Around the table, murmurs rippled through the group. Emma's heart raced. Streamlining operations? Leadership adjustments? What did he mean? Daniel continued, his voice unwavering. "Effective immediately, I'll be restructuring several departments. Some positions will be eliminated, while others will see new responsibilities added." Another pause, longer this time. This was it, the moment Emma had dreaded without even realizing it until now. Her hands clenched into fists under the table, nails digging into her palms. "And finally," Daniel said, his gaze piercing as it returned to Emma, "I've made the difficult decision to let go of certain individuals whose skill sets no longer align with the direction I envision for the company." There it was, the blow delivered with surgical precision. Emma froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. Letting people go? No, not just people. Her. A wave of disbelief crashed over her. Surely, he didn't mean what she thought he meant. They were siblings, after all, not just by blood but by years of shared struggle. Growing up, they'd stood side by side as their parents poured everything they had into building this business from scratch. They dreamed together, fought together, and celebrated victories together. And now, he was firing her? The room seemed to blur around her as Daniel went on, listing off generic reasons about efficiency and adaptability. Emma barely heard him. All she could focus on was the betrayal radiating from his words, sharp and unrelenting. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. When their father passed away unexpectedly 5 years ago, leaving the business in their care, they'd promised each other they'd keep it alive, not just as a legacy but as a testament to everything their family had worked for. Together. But apparently, together no longer included her. When Daniel finished speaking, the silence that followed was suffocating. The other executives exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable witnessing such a personal vendetta play out in front of them. For Emma though, it felt surreal, as if she were watching herself from outside her own body. How could he do this? After everything they'd been through? Then, against every instinct screaming inside her to fight back, to demand answers, to defend herself, Emma did something unexpected. She laughed. It started as a soft chuckle barely audible, but quickly grew louder, filling the oppressive quiet of the boardroom. Heads snapped in her direction, confusion etched across faces. Even Daniel looked taken aback, his perfectly composed facade cracking ever so slightly. Emma leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other as if she didn't have a care in the world. Her laughter echoed off the walls, bouncing back at her like a challenge. "Well, well," she said finally, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. Her voice was light, almost playful, masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. "This is certainly one way to start your first day as managing director." Daniel frowned, clearly unsettled by her reaction. "Emma, don't make this harder than it has to be." "Oh, Daniel," she replied, shaking her head with mock sympathy. "You always did think things had to be hard. But tell me, when exactly did you decide my skills weren't aligned anymore? Was it last week during the quarterly review where I presented the strategy that increased our market share by 15%? Or maybe it was 2 months ago when I negotiated the partnership deal everyone told us was impossible. Her words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. A few of the executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward her. Inside were termination papers, neatly typed and ready for her signature. "You've done great work, Emma," he said stiffly, his tone devoid of emotion. "But sometimes change is necessary. You'll receive a generous severance package, of course." Emma stared at the folder, resisting the urge to throw it across the room. Generous severance package? As if money could erase the years she'd invested in this company, the sacrifices she'd made, the late nights and early mornings spent pouring her soul into keeping it afloat. Money couldn't buy loyalty, or forgiveness. She pushed the folder aside without looking at it. "How noble of you," she said dryly. "But I'm afraid I won't be signing anything today." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Don't be childish, Emma. Accept the terms and move on. You're smart, you'll find something else." Something else. The word stung more than she cared to admit. Did he really think she could simply walk away from the only life she'd ever known? From the dreams she'd built alongside him? Anger bubbled inside her, hot and searing, but she forced herself to remain calm. Losing control wouldn't help her now. Instead, she stood up, smoothing her skirt with deliberate slowness. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting to see what she'd do next. Would she explode? Cry? Beg for another chance? None of those options appealed to her. No, she would leave on her own terms, not his. "Fine," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. "If that's how you want to play it, then so be it. But remember this, Daniel, actions have consequences. And trust me, you haven't seen the last of me." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out of the boardroom, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Behind her, she heard whispers breaking out among the executives, but she didn't look back. She refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break down. Not here. Not now. As she stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the ground floor, Emma allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Leaning against the cool metal wall, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Pain, anger, disbelief, all of it swirled inside her like a violent storm. But amidst the chaos, something else stirred, determination. Daniel may have fired her, but he hadn't defeated her. Far from it. If anything, he just lit a fire within her, a fire that burned brighter and hotter with each passing second. She wouldn't let him destroy everything they'd built together. Not without a fight. The elevator dinged, signaling her arrival at the lobby. As the door slid open, Emma straightened her posture, squared her shoulders, and stepped out into the bright sunlight streaming through the glass doors. The world outside felt vast and full of possibilities, and for the first time in hours she smiled, not because she was happy, but because she knew exactly what she needed to do next. The streets buzzed with life as Emma strode purposefully toward the coffee shop on the corner. It wasn't just any coffee shop, it was her sanctuary, the place she'd escaped to countless times over the years when the pressures of the family business became too much. Today, however, it wasn't caffeine or solitude she sought, it was clarity. She needed to figure out her next move, and sitting alone in her favorite booth gave her the space to think without distractions. As she sipped her latte, Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled through old emails, notes, and documents. She wanted to remind herself of everything she'd accomplished in the company, every deal she'd brokered, every project she'd spearheaded, every success she'd driven. Each email was a reminder that Daniel hadn't fired her because she lacked value. No, this was about something else entirely. Power. Control. Jealousy. The realization stung, but it also fueled her resolve. Her mind drifted back to their childhood, to the days when they were inseparable. Their parents had instilled in them the importance of teamwork, teaching them that success wasn't achieved alone but through collaboration and trust. Those lessons had shaped both of them, or so she'd thought. Now, it seemed Daniel had forgotten everything they'd been taught. Emma sighed, leaning back in her seat. She couldn't dwell on the past forever. What mattered now was the future. And as much as it hurt to admit, her future no longer lay with the family business. At least, not in its current form. But walking away wasn't an option either. She owed it to herself, and to her parents, to fight for what she believed in. By the time she left the coffee shop, her thoughts were clearer, sharper. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. Instead, it morphed into something else: motivation. She had skills, connections, and experience. More importantly, she had grit. If Daniel thought he could push her out and move on without consequence, he was sorely mistaken. Over the next few days, Emma threw herself into planning. She reached out to former colleagues, industry contacts, and mentors, seeking advice and exploring opportunities. Some conversations led nowhere, but others sparked ideas she hadn't considered before. One former client, in particular, offered her a lifeline, an invitation to consult on a major project. It wasn't permanent employment, but it was a start, and exactly the kind of challenge she needed to prove herself. But Emma didn't stop there. While networking and securing short-term work kept her busy, she also began laying the groundwork for something bigger. Late at night, after long days of meetings and brainstorming sessions, she sat at her kitchen table sketching out plans for her own venture. It was risky. Starting a business from scratch required resources she didn't yet have, but the idea ignited a spark within her that nothing else could extinguish. Her vision was simple yet ambitious: create a platform that empowered small businesses to compete in an increasingly saturated market. Over the years, she'd seen firsthand how large corporations crushed smaller players, often using unfair tactics to maintain dominance. Her goal was to level the playing field, offering tools, strategies, and support tailored specifically to entrepreneurs who lacked access to big budgets and extensive networks. As weeks turned into months, Emma's confidence grew. She secured funding from investors impressed by her track record and passion. She assembled a team of talented individuals who shared her vision and commitment. Slowly but surely, her dream began taking shape. And with each milestone reached, she felt a little piece of herself healing. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Nights when she lay awake wondering if she was making a mistake, if she should have tried harder to reconcile with Daniel instead of striking out on her own. But those doubts never lasted long. Deep down, she knew she was doing the right thing, not just for herself, but for everyone counting on her to lead by example. One evening, as she prepared for a presentation to potential clients, Emma received an unexpected call. It was Sarah, one of her closest friends from college and someone who'd always supported her unconditionally. They hadn't spoken in weeks, and hearing Sarah's voice brought a rush of nostalgia. "Hey stranger," Sarah said cheerfully. "How's life treating you these days?" Emma hesitated, unsure how much to share. Talking about her struggles always made her feel vulnerable, even with someone as understanding as Sarah. But tonight, she found herself opening up in ways she hadn't anticipated. "It's complicated," she admitted, running a hand through her hair. "Things with Daniel got messy. Really messy." Sarah listened patiently as Emma recounted the events leading up to her dismissal, her tone shifting between anger, sadness, and determination. By the end of the story, Sarah was silent for a moment before responding. "Wow," she said finally. "That sounds incredibly tough. But honestly, Em, I'm proud of you. You're handling this with so much grace and strength. Most people would have crumbled under the weight of all that." Grace and strength. The words caught Emma off guard. Was that how others saw her? Because most days, she felt anything but graceful or strong. Yet hearing Sarah say it aloud planted a seed of belief, a tiny flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was capable of overcoming whatever came her way. Their conversation ended with Sarah promising to introduce Emma to some key contacts in her network, people who might be interested in partnering with her new venture. As Emma hung up the phone, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Building her company wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't alone. She had allies, supporters, believers. And that made all the difference. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Emma juggled client meetings, investor pitches, and team-building exercises, all while fine-tuning her business model. There were setbacks, of course, moments when deals fell through or strategies failed, but each obstacle only strengthened her resolve. She learned to embrace failure as part of the process, viewing it not as defeat but as feedback. And then one day, an opportunity arose that changed everything. A tech conference in the city announced a startup competition with a grand prize that included significant funding, mentorship, and exposure to top-tier investors. Winning wouldn't guarantee success, but it would provide the boost her fledgling company desperately needed. Emma poured her heart and soul into preparing for the competition. She rehearsed her pitch tirelessly, refining every word until it sang with conviction and authenticity. On the day of the event, she arrived early, dressed professionally but comfortably, ready to face whatever came her way. The auditorium buzzed with energy as dozens of startups showcased their innovations. Emma mingled with fellow entrepreneurs, exchanging stories and insights, drawing inspiration from their journeys. Despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. This was her element, her chance to shine. When her turn came to present, Emma walked onto the stage with poise and confidence. She greeted the panel of judges warmly, then launched into her pitch with passion and precision. Every slide, every statistic, every anecdote reinforced her vision of empowering small businesses. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause, a sound so powerful it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, as she mingled with attendees and answered questions, Emma noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Marcus, a former colleague from the family business and someone she'd always respected. He approached her with a warm smile, extending his hand. "Great job up there," he said sincerely. "You've come a long way since we last worked together." Emma returned his handshake, grateful for the compliment. "Thanks, Marcus. That means a lot coming from you." They chatted briefly about her new venture, and as they parted ways, Marcus added, "Keep pushing forward, Emma. People like you are exactly what this industry needs." His words stayed with her long after the conference ended. They reminded her why she'd embarked on this journey in the first place: to make a difference, to challenge the status quo, to prove that resilience could triumph over adversity. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear: she was ready for whatever came next. Back home later that night, Emma sat at her desk reviewing notes from the day's presentations. Her mind replayed every detail, analyzing what went well and what could improve. But amidst the analysis, a single thought lingered: Daniel. Somewhere along the way, she realized, her focus had shifted. It wasn't about him anymore, not really. Sure, his betrayal had been the catalyst, but her journey had become something far greater than revenge or vindication. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of achieving greatness on her own terms. Yet, even as she embraced this newfound independence, a question lingered in the back of her mind: what would Daniel think if he saw her now? Would he regret his decision? Or would he dismiss her achievements as irrelevant? Weeks turned into months, and Emma's startup began gaining traction in ways she hadn't dared to imagine. Her platform, designed to empower small businesses with affordable tools and actionable insights, quickly became a beacon of hope for entrepreneurs struggling against corporate giants. Investors were impressed not just by her innovative approach but also by her unwavering determination. The tech conference had been a turning point, opening doors she never thought possible. One crisp autumn morning, as Emma prepared for yet another client meeting, an email notification popped up on her laptop screen. It was from the family business, or rather, Daniel. Her heart skipped a beat as she hesitated, unsure whether to open it or let it sit unread. Curiosity eventually got the better of her, and with a deep breath, she clicked. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she debated how to respond. Part of her wanted to ignore him entirely. After all, he'd made his decision clear months ago. But another part, the part that still remembered the boy who used to share secrets with her under the stars, felt compelled to hear him out. After a moment's deliberation, she typed a simple reply: "Fine. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. My office." The next day, Emma sat behind her desk, waiting. She'd chosen this location deliberately. It symbolized everything she'd built on her own, away from the shadow of their family legacy. When Daniel walked in, looking more subdued than she'd ever seen him, Emma felt a pang of nostalgia. He wasn't the arrogant managing director anymore. He seemed smaller somehow. "You wanted to talk," she said evenly, gesturing for him to take a seat. His usual confidence was absent, replaced by something closer to vulnerability. Daniel nodded, avoiding her gaze as he settled into the chair across from her. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice quieter than she expected. "What I did, firing you like that, it was wrong. Selfish. And I regret it every single day." Emma raised an eyebrow, surprised by his candor. "That's quite a confession coming from you. What changed?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Everything fell apart after you left. Morale plummeted. Key clients started pulling out because they didn't trust my leadership. The board is questioning my decisions, and honestly. He paused, swallowing hard. I don't know if I can fix it alone. Emma leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. For years, she dreamed of seeing him humbled, of watching him realize the magnitude of his mistake. But now that the moment was here, she didn't feel the satisfaction she'd anticipated. Instead, she felt pity. Not for what he'd done to her, but for the mess he'd created for himself. So what do you want from me? She asked bluntly. You think I'll waltz back in and save your sinking ship? Is that why you're here? No. Daniel exclaimed, shaking his head emphatically. I wouldn't ask that of you, not after everything. I needed to say I'm sorry. And maybe there's a way we could work together again. On equal footing this time. As partners. Emma blinked, caught off guard by his proposal. Partners? The idea was almost laughable given their history. Yet, as she considered it, a seed of possibility took root in her mind. If anyone understood the intricacies of the family business, it was her. And if she joined forces with Daniel, perhaps they could rebuild not just the company but their fractured relationship as well. But forgiveness wasn't something she could give lightly. If we're going to do this, she said firmly, things have to change. No more power plays, no more shutting people out. We run this company as a team, or not at all. Daniel nodded vigorously. Agreed. Whatever it takes. Just tell me where to start. For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to smile, a real, genuine smile. There was still so much work to be done, both within the business and between them. But as she looked at Daniel sitting across from her, visibly humbled and eager to make amends, she realized something important. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to move forward despite it. 6 months later, the family business was thriving once again. Under Emma and Daniel's joint leadership, they implemented sweeping changes that prioritized transparency, collaboration, and innovation. Employees who had once feared Daniel's authoritarian style now praised the inclusive culture fostered by Emma's influence. Clients returned, reassured by the stability and vision the siblings brought to the table. One evening, as they stood side by side overlooking the city skyline from their shared office, Daniel broke the comfortable silence. We make a pretty good team, huh? Emma chuckled softly, glancing at him with a knowing smile. Don't get too cocky. You're still learning. He grinned, raising his hands in mock surrender. Fair enough. But seriously, thank you for coming back, for trusting me again. I know I don't deserve it. Emma placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. We've both made mistakes, Daniel. What matters is that we're fixing them, together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues over the bustling city, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she knew one thing for certain, they were stronger together than apart. Their journey, from betrayal to reconciliation, had transformed not only their business but also their bond as siblings. And in that moment, standing beside her brother, Emma realized she'd found something even more valuable than success, redemption.